You are listening to A Scary State, and this week we're continuing on with our October specials. So, Kenzie?
Yes, Lauren?
Let's get scary. But before we get scary, please listen to this promo from friends of the podcast called Private Dicks.
Have you got a mystery that needs solving?
Where is Amelia Earhart?
We know.
Who the hell was D.B. Cooper?
Easy.
Bermuda Triangle?
Probably solve that one next.
Here at Private Dicks, we guarantee a mystery solved every episode.
That's with a capital G.
Every second Friday, the Private Dicks take a client, record their session, and solve the world's greatest mysteries.
One by one.
Private Dicks solve them, no problem. God, I love just crushing mysteries. Search up Private Dicks on your favorite podcatcher, and you can solve a mystery too.
The mystery of what's your favorite podcast?
It's Private Dicks. Another one solved.
If you have a mystery to be solved, call 1-855-PRVT-DIX. That's 1-855-PRIVATE-DICKS.
Call 1-855-PRIVATE-DICKS and leave us the rundown of the case. Maybe the Dicks will solve it.
855 Private Dicks.
All right, if you guys could give them a little listen, that would be awesome, and potentially listen ahead in the future for any other things we do with them.
And if you have a small business and want to sponsor us and get some advertising.
We'd love to be friends.
Even like $10.
Yeah, anything. All right, so Mackenzie, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about famous disappearances. And so I looked up some famous disappearances, and these were some from the History Channel, so history.com. The first one they have is Jimmy Hoffa. On July 30th, 1975, James Riddle Hoffa, one of the most influential American labor leaders of the 20th century, disappeared in Detroit, Michigan, never to be heard from again. He was born in 1913 to a poor coal miner in Indiana. He was very charismatic. He worked for a Detroit grocery chain, and he organized a labor strike that got him noticed with the powerful Teamsters Union. And he rose through the ranks and the next few decades and took over in 1957 as their president. So for all the battles that he fought and won on behalf of American workers, he also had a dark side. So his tenure as team master leader meant that they were partnering with the mafia in racketeering, extortion, and embezzlement. He had relationships with high-ranking mobsters and was the target of several government investigations throughout the 1960s. Convicted first of obstruction of justice and later of attempted bribery, he began a 13-year prison sentence in March 1967. Nixon commuted the sentence in 1971, and Hoffa quickly began making a comeback within the Teamster leadership, penning his autobiography. But those plans came to a screeching halt, because on July 30th, 1975, when Hoffa was last seen in the parking lot of a Detroit restaurant not far from where he got his start as a labor organizer, though many have speculated that he was the victim of a mafia hit, conclusive evidence was never found, and his fate remains a mystery to this day. He was declared legally dead in 1982.
That's recent.
Mm-hmm. Everyone, of course, knows Amelia Earhart. Daring around-the-world flight was cut short when her Lockheed Electra disappeared over the Pacific Ocean on June 2nd, 1937.
I've been listening to this guy on YouTube. His name's Mr. Ballin. He's actually really fun to listen to. He does 3 places you're not supposed to go, but people went anyways. They're creepy videos. And so one of them, he talked about Amelia Earhart, and one of the theories of her was that she got taken, killed by coconuts, shrimp, coconut crabs.
No. Well, yes. But one of the more believable theories is that she was a spy.
Oh, yes, I've heard that one too.
But within hours, rescue workers began scouring the area for signs of the famed aviator and her navigator, Fred Noonan, a living legend who vanished into thin air. In the official report, the U.S. government concluded that the 2 seasoned flyers, unable to locate their destination of Flannan Isles, ran out of fuel, crashed into the water, and sank. Earhart was declared legally dead on January 5th, 1939. The Lost Colony.
Oh, yep.
In July 1587, roughly 115 English men, women, and children landed on Roanoke Island, located off the coast of North Carolina in what is now Dare County. So I think Cape Hatteras area.
Okay.
I don't know. Less than a month after their arrival, the settlers welcomed the arrival of Virginia Dare, the first English baby born in the Americas.
Yep.
As tensions mounted between the colonists and local tribes, The fledgling town's governor, John White, who was also Virginia's grandfather, set sail for England to seek out help and supplies, and when he returned 3 years later, the settlement was completely deserted, and all of its inhabitants had vanished. The only clue that had been left behind was a single word carved into the wooden post.
Croatoa.
Thank you. The name of the local and friendly Native American tribe. D.B. Cooper.
Of course.
What a great day. On November 24th,
Oh my God.
1971, a man wearing a black raincoat and a dark suit wrapped around sunglasses took his seat on Northwest Orient Flight 305, scheduled to take off from Portland, Oregon, and arrive in Seattle, Washington. After takeoff, he handed a note to a flight attendant who assumed he was hitting on her and placed it in her purse. He then told her he had a bomb in his briefcase and demanded $200,000 for parachutes and no funny stuff. The passenger identified himself as Dan Cooper, but thanks to a reporting error as the story was breaking, he was forever immortalized as D.B. Cooper.
Oh, that's actually really cool. I didn't know that.
While his body was never recovered, in 1980, an 8-year-old boy found a stack of nearly $5,880 of the ransom money in sands along the north bank of the Columbia River, 5 miles from Vancouver,
Jeez,
Washington.
that would be so cool. I would just, say, oh my God, I found $1,000. I'd keep all the rest of that.
And then the last one I have is Joseph Force Crater. The disappearance of the New York Supreme Court Judge Joseph Force Crater captured so much media attention that the phrase pulling a crater briefly entered the public vernacular as a synonym for going AWOL.
Can that happen again to all the Supreme Court people?
Well, not all of them.
Not all of them, just
Just
the
like
ones we don't want.
6.
Okay, we'll get rid of 6 of them. Just kidding.
On August 6th, 1930, the Dapper, that's what it says.
I actually love that word,
Right?
dapper.
The dapper 41-year-old left his office and dined with an acquaintance at a Manhattan chop house. He was last seen walking down the street outside the restaurant. The massive investigation into his disappearance captivated the nation.
Captivated.
Yeah, because I almost fucked up that word. Earning Carter the title of the missingest man in New York.
Okay.
Carter was infamous for his shady dealings with the corrupt Tammany Hall political machine and frequent dalliances with showgirls. In the days leading up to his disappearance, he had reportedly received a mysterious phone call and cashed 2 large personal checks. These details spawned rampant speculation that the judge had been a victim of foul play. He was declared legally dead in 1939.
So those are just some of the disappearances
Correct.
that have happened in the U.S. So we have some fun ones to talk about. Before we talk about it, though, we forgot to mention it. We have set up our little studio a little bit more. We've added some more lights and some things on the walls and some cute skeletons. It's coming together.
It is very coming together.
It's very coming
It's
together.
very coming together. Oh, happy anniversary.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Joe and I have been married for a year, which is wild to think
Yeah,
about.
I can't believe that was a year ago.
I can't either.
Feels like it was a lot longer.
I know. Maybe because we've been together for a really long time. Yeah, yesterday Joe was sitting on the couch and he was like, huh. And I was like, what are you thinking about? He's like, I can't tell if it feels like we've been together longer than a year or less than a year. And I was like, nah, I don't know.
Okay.
We also watched the weirdest movie. It's called Hellraiser. So it's an old movie, but it's like they kind of did a remake of it. I don't think I'd watch it again. It was very weird. It's like this puzzle, and if you solve the puzzle, it moves on to like round 2 of the puzzle. But each time you do it, you're kind of unleashing these creepy things from other dimensions or whatever. I don't know. It was very
Sounds
odd.
like a really fucked up game of Jumanji.
Kind of, yeah. It was just weird.
Yeah.
And like we finished it and Joe was like, I don't know how I feel about it. I said, I don't know either. And I was like, I don't think I'd watch it again. He goes, no, I don't think so either. It's like the stereotypical, you've seen it. It's like Needlehead or Pinhead or whatever. It's the person who has all the like needles in their head.
Why would I have seen something like that?
I mean, it's like a common pop culture thing.
Okay.
Well, anywho, it was creepy. Not a big fan. And then I had a weird dream last night, so I think it correlates to that. But
Probably.
well, okay. So I'll get into what I'm talking about now. So, a ghost ship, also known as a phantom ship, is a boat that has no living crew aboard. Some well-known ghost ships are the Flying Dutchman and the Princess Augusta. The number of ghost ships, all in folklore, fiction, historically, and unsubstantiated, is wild.
I was thinking about this when I was doing my research, that for next Halloween, we could do fun, like unique haunted places. Not like a hotel or a house,
Oh!
but like the Flying Dutchman, like a haunted ship.
That would be
or
fun.
Something like that.
That would be fun.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we'll make a note of that and hopefully remember a year from now.
We need like an ideas tab.
I think we have one.
I think we do.
Okay, cool. It's on there.
On December 4th, 1872, a boat with no crew was found floating, seemingly abandoned, in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of the Azores Island. From this point on, it was known as a ghost ship, and the mystery of what happened to its crew has never been discovered. So, in 1861, the British registered ship, the Amazon, was built in Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia. The
I've been there.
Really?
Yeah,
Wait, that was where...
Mhm.
Yep.
For those of you that don't know, and who haven't caught on to the fact that I make this essentially a part of my personality, I don't like scary movies. And the last scary movie I ever watched was Final Destination, and it was on our family vacation to Nova Scotia.
How fitting for this episode.
Right?
So the Amazon was described as being 93.3 feet or 30.3 meters in length, 27.5 feet or 7.8 meters broad, 11.7 feet or 3.6 meters deep, and a 198.42 gross tonnage.
Can you ever, like, when someone gives you measurements like that, can you actually picture it in your head?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I just think, 93, that's very big.
Yeah. Yeah, on the family vacation that we were on in Nova Scotia in Canada, my dad, we drove up there.
Mhm.
And my dad didn't realize that it's kilometers. So he was going 110 miles per hour.
Oh, no.
And all of a sudden he's like, shit, and slams on the brakes. And we're like, what? He's like, it's kilometers.
Oh, no.
We were fine. We didn't get pulled over.
Oh, my God, that is so funny.
Yeah.
I wonder if a cop would have been like, I understand. Like, be
Yeah.
smart.
I feel like in Canada, they're nice.
Right. She, the Amazon, was launched on May 18th, 1861, headed by Dewis, with co-owner and first captain Robert McLellan. And yes, this ship, in all reports and in all time, is always referred to as a she. All ships are a she. That is why I'm going to call her a she, because that's what she is. Her maiden...
Women are awesome.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Joe and I watched a movie last night. It was called Prey. And it's like Alien and Predator kind of movie.
Mm.
And Joe was like, this is a really fuck the patriarchy movie. And I was like, hell yeah. Because the girl, like, the whole time she's showing that, like, she's better than the guys and she can hunt. It was cool. So the whole time, like, fuck the patriarchy.
That's how I felt
Hit
when
him.
I got the cap off without the help of a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
We
like,
got this.
don't fucking need any
We don't
man.
need men. Okay. Her maiden voyage took place about a month later in June 1861, and she sailed to 5 islands to take on a cargo of timber to transport across the Atlantic to London. But Captain McLellan soon fell ill, and his condition continued to worsen. The ship was forced to turn back, and on June 18th, he died. John Nutting Parker then took over as captain of the Amazon and continued on that voyage to London. She, the Amazon, experienced more issues when, in the Narrows off Eastport, Maine, she collided with fishing equipment, and then, after reaching London and heading back across the Atlantic, she ran into a brig in the English Channel, causing the brig to sink. But that seemed to be the end of her misfortune, and she continued to sail for the next few years with no other issues. But then, in October of 1867, a bad storm appeared while the Amazon was sailing, and she was driven ashore. She was so badly damaged that her owner saw no way to repair her and abandoned her as a wreck. Then, on October 15th, just a few days after the wreck, a man named Alexander McBean of Nova Scotia acquired the rubble that was the Amazon. McBean sold that wreck to a man who then sold it to Richard W. Haynes, who restored the boat. So it's passed along to many, many different people.
Mm-hmm.
Haynes made himself captain, and in December 1868, he registered the boat with the Collector of Customs in New York. He named the ship the Mary Celeste, sometimes referred to as the Marie Celeste, and it was a brigantine merchant ship, now American registered. A brigantine means that the ship was a, quote, 2-masted sailing vessel with a fully square-rigged foremast and at least 2 sails on the mainmast, a square topsail and a gaff sail, mainsail behind the mast. So pretty much,
A big boat.
any boat you have seen or pictured when you think of a big boat, that's the Mary Celeste.
Yeah.
So she changed ownership many times throughout the years, and during these years, no records of her travel or trade activity were recorded, if there were any in the first place. In early 1872, she was enlarged. So now we're going to go to lengths again. Her new length was 103 feet or 31 meters. Breadth was 25.7 feet or 7.8 meters. And depth was 16.2 feet or 4.9 meters. A second deck was added, the poop deck was extended, and some timbers were replaced. The tonnage of the ship increased from 198.42 to 282.28. So,
Big boat.
big boat. Can't wrap my head around what it means, but it's big.
Captain, I think we're going to need a bigger boat.
And around this time, the new captain, Benjamin Spooner Briggs, was appointed. Briggs had come from a big sailing family. His father was a sea captain, and all but one son out of 5 went to sea.
Big boat guy.
Big boat guy. 2 of them becoming captains themselves. Briggs married his cousin, Sarah Elizabeth
Ew.
Cobb in 1862, and the two had 2 children, a son named Arthur and a daughter, Sophia Matilda.
And yet we want so badly to follow the laws that were made back then, and these were the decisions that we were making.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep. So around the time of his daughter's birth, Briggs had gained recognition in this profession. This allowed Briggs to invest in a ship, the Mary Celeste, and also be the one to take her on her first voyage to Genoa, Italy.
Ooh.
Yes.
Okay. It just popped into my head. So you know how they say, like, it's unhealthy to have children with family members?
Uh-huh.
Do you think, obviously before we knew that, a bunch of people did it.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's why we have, like, some of the diseases that are gene related.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's a good thought. That might be right. I don't know enough about genes or anything like that to make an informed decision.
They may already have figured out what it is, and I could totally be wrong, but it seemed like a good idea.
I mean, it makes sense. So Briggs made plans for his wife and young daughter to join him on the trip. His son, who was about 7 at the time, was going to stay at home with his grandmother. He was school-aged, so I assume that was part of the reason why he wouldn't join on the expedition.
How old was the daughter?
Only around 2.
Oh, okay.
So it would work for her to go,
Yeah.
him to stay. Briggs also made sure to choose a crew who he knew he could count on. His first mate was His first mate was Albert G. Richardson.
Albert, love the name.
Oh, there's always an Albert somewhere.
There's always an Albert.
Richardson had sailed under Briggs before, and he was a nephew of a Winchester.
Nephew?
I had niece in here, and that's obviously not right. Or he was married to a niece of a Winchester. Somehow he's related to this Winchester.
Got it.
This is an important name, James H. Winchester, because he owned at least a half share of the Mary Celeste, so he
Okay.
kind of had a lot of say of what went on. Briggs' second mate was Andrew Gilling, who was 25. The steward was a newly married man named Edward William Head, and he had a signed recommendation from Winchester. And there were 4 general seamen who were all Germans from the Flannan Isles, brothers Volkert and Bose Lorenzen, Arian Martz, and Gottlieb Gaudschall.
God bless.
Thank you. They were all described as peaceful and first-class sailors. Briggs had written a letter to his mother saying that he was very satisfied with the ship and the crew he had selected. Sarah Briggs had also written to her mother and said that the crew seemed very capable. So they set out on their new maiden voyage. On October 20th, 1872, the ship arrived at Pier 50 on the East River in New York City. There, the ship would be loaded with 1,701 barrels of alcohol.
Nice.
A week later, his daughter and wife joined him on the ship. On Sunday, November 3rd, Briggs wrote another letter to his mother saying that they had planned to leave on Tuesday, 2 days later, and added that, quote, "Our vessel is in beautiful trim, and I hope we shall have a fine passage." The ship did leave when Briggs wanted on November 5th, which was Tuesday, and they moved into the New York harbor. All aboard the ship at the time was Briggs, his daughter, his wife, and the 7 crewmen, so about 10 people.
Doesn't seem like a lot for such a big boat, unless I'm just
I have no idea, but apparently that's all
I don't
you
know. When
needed.
I think of like boats like that, like I think of like
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yep.
With all the people.
Like that's what I imagine.
I guess maybe if they're like super capable and know what they're doing, they
Yeah.
don't need a ton of people. And you'll see later, it seems like that's about the number of people you have.
Mhm.
So due to the weather at the time being uncertain, Briggs decided it was best to anchor there in the harbor for a bit and wait for better sailing conditions. The ship was anchored just off the coast of Staten Island. And while they were waiting for the weather to pass, Sarah decided to send one last letter to her mother-in-law. It said, quote, "Tell Arthur, her son, I make great dependence on the letters I shall get from him, and will try to remember anything that happens on the voyage which he may be pleased to hear." Finally, after 2 days of waiting, the weather cleared up and the crew set sail, leaving the harbor and entering the Atlantic Ocean. The route that the Mary Celeste was taking to make it to Genoa, Italy, was actually a very popular route. A Canadian ship, the De Gratia, the Latin phrase for "by the grace of God," was chilling in Hoboken, New York. They were going to be
chilling.
just chilling. They were going to be transporting petroleum to Genoa. Their captain, David Morehouse, and his first mate, Oliver DeVoe, were both from Nova Scotia and were very experienced and respected seamen. It is said that
Seamen.
I was waiting for it. It was said that Morehouse and Briggs were familiar with each other and may have even dined together at some point, so they're like friendly guys. About 8 days after the Mary Celeste left for Italy, so did the De Gratia, following generally the same route. On Wednesday, December 4th, 1872, the De Gratia was midway between Azores and the coast of Portugal at around 1 p.m. Captain Morehouse had been under deck, but had been alerted by his helmsman that there appeared to be a vessel about 6 miles, or 9.7 kilometers ahead of their ship, and it appeared to be heading directly towards them. While Morehouse was looking at this vessel, he realized that something was wrong. The ship in the distance was moving erratically, and the sails were set in an odd position that a sailing ship shouldn't be in. As they drew closer to the boat, Morehouse sent a few signals but got no reply. He soon realized that there was no one aboard the ship. Morehouse sent his first mate, DeVoe, and his second mate, John Wright, to take one of their smaller boats and head over to the abandoned ship they saw to check it out, kind of see what was going on. The pair got into their boat and made their way to the abandoned vessel. Upon getting closer, on the stern of the boat, they saw the name Mary Celeste. DeVoe and Wright climbed aboard and noticed that the Mary Celeste was completely deserted. Not a single other soul was on the ship. They then noticed the sails were in horrible condition, some partly set, some missing completely. Most of the rigs aboard were damaged, with some ropes hanging over the sides of the ship, which is not where ropes should be.
Mm-hmm.
The cover over the main hatch was secure, but the other two hatches, the fore and the lazarette, so that's the space where equipment and gear is typically stored. There are a lot of sea terms.
Uh-huh.
So those hatches were open, and their covers were sitting next to them on the deck. The one lifeboat that the ship should have was missing, and the case that holds the ship's compass was shifted with the glass cover broken. There was 3.5 feet or 1.1 meters of water in the hold. That's a lot, but apparently not alarming due to the size of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like any water on a boat should be alarming.
Right, because it's supposed to be on the water, not in the water.
Right, but that's just me. There had been a makeshift sounding rod, so this is a device that measures the amount of water in the hold. That was found abandoned and discarded on the deck. Making their way through the boat, the men eventually got to the crew's cabins. The ship's daily log was found in the mate's cabin. Reading over it, they found that the final entry in the log was dated November 25th, just a day after an amazing day.
Damn.
At 8 a.m., and that was 9 days earlier than, so it's been 9 days since this log was written.
Yeah.
They also noted that the day before the final entry, the log talked about foul weather at sea. The log stated that the Mary Celeste was off the coast of the Santa Maria Islands in the Azores, which is about 400 nautical miles or 740 kilometers from where the boat was currently floating.
Mm.
Also in the cabin, DeVoe noted that the interior was wet and untidy from the water that had made its way in through doorways and skylights, but other than that, it was for the most part in order. The pair moved into the captain's cabin and found personal items scattered all over the floor, to include a sheathed sword under the bed, but most of the papers about the ship that should be on the ship were missing, along with the captain's navigational instruments. The cargo, the many, many barrels of alcohol, had also been untouched. Continuing through the ship, the pair found that there had been no prepared food and no food that was in the process of being made, but there was stored food on the ship, enough to last the crew 6 months, and they thought the whole trip would last 6 months.
Right.
No signs of violence or a fire were present. So the two men said it appeared as if there had been an orderly exit from the boat via the missing lifeboat and no clear distress. DeVoe and Wright finished up their search of the empty boat and made their way back to the De Gratia to tell their captain about what they had found. Morehouse made the decision to bring the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, which is another place in Italy, and it's just fun to say. The crew of the De Gratia was planning on getting to Italy through Gibraltar. And it was about 600 nautical miles or 1,100 kilometers away. So this is a very dangerous idea, though, as in order to get the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, the crew of the De Gratia would have to be split in half. So half would sail the Mary Celeste, while the other half remained on their ship. And though this was a dangerous plan, Morehouse was aware of the maritime law that deals with salvaging and rescuing an abandoned ship. So pretty much this law says that if you find an abandoned ship in the ocean, no crew or anything, you can expect a substantial share of the combined value of that rescued ship and the cargo of the ship. So you bring it to shore based on how dangerous it was for you to get this and how much all the cargo is, you'll get pretty much that money.
Compensated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So they knew this was going to be
Be worth it, yeah.
Yes. So the crew of the 8 divided up, with DeVoe and the 2 other experienced seamen boarding the Mary Celeste. Process to Gibraltar was slow, as the ships were very undercrewed, so it seems like they only need about 8 people.
Yeah.
So now they have 4, so that's really small. And it was hard to run these big ships with so little people. But finally, on December 12th, the De Gratia reached the shore, followed the next day by the Mary Celeste, who had run into some fog on their journey, but they were all fine. She was immediately impounded in order to prepare for the salvage hearings. When DeVoe was finally on land, he wrote to his wife saying, quote, "I can hardly tell what I am made of, but I do not care so long as I got in safe. I shall be well paid for the Mary Celeste." So they think they're gonna get a good amount of money. So the salvage hearings. Of course, the hearing had to be conducted to see if the crew of the De Gratia actually salvaged the boat, if it was actually abandoned, making sure there was no foul play, kind of all that stuff.
Right.
Just hearing all the info surrounding the whole situation and determine how much money it would be worth. The hearing took place on December 17th, 1872, under the rule of Sir James Cochrane, the Chief Justice of Gibraltar. One of the men who helped conduct the hearing was Frederick Solly Flood, who was not very favored among others. A historian once described Flood as a man, quote, whose arrogance and pomposity were inversely proportional to his IQ. And, quote, the sort of man who, once he had made up his mind about something, couldn't be shifted. So he just sounds like kind of an awful guy.
I think it's funny that his name is Flood.
Right. So he listened to the testimonies of both DeVoe and Wright, the two who had first boarded the Mary Celeste, and Flood was convinced that a crime had been committed and that, quote, the inference is that there had been foul play somewhere and that alcohol is at the bottom of it. He then ordered the ship to be examined on December 23rd by surveyor of shipping John Austin and a diver Richard Portunato. While looking at the ship, Austin noted that the bow had a 6-foot or 1.8 meter long gash on either side of it. He believed that this was caused by a sharp instrument. Austin, along with a group of Royal Naval captains, all agreed that the bow had been deliberately cut. He also found possible traces of blood on the captain's sword, as well as blood on the ship's rails. They also found deep marks, which could have been caused by an axe. Austin noted that he did not believe that the ship had encountered rough weather, been involved in a collision, or run aground. These findings strengthened Flood's beliefs that everything had been of human wrongdoing and not the result of any natural disasters.
Would they still get compensated, or do they think they're at fault?
They think they're at fault.
Ah.
So you won't get compensated if you, like, killed the crew and brought the boat in. Yeah, so they're trying to figure out if that's what happened.
Okay.
Or if it was actually they found this abandoned boat and are bringing it in.
Right.
So Flood wrote up his report and sent it to the Board of Trade in London on January 22nd, 1873. His report pretty much stated that the crew of the De Gratia had got at the alcohol and had murdered the Briggs family and ship's officers in a drunken frenzy. They had cut the bows to simulate a collision and fled in the rescue boat to suffer an unknown fate. He thought that Morehouse and his crew were hiding something, mainly that the Mary Celeste had to have had been abandoned in a more easterly location than what they had claimed, and that the logbook around the Mary Celeste had been doctored. He was unconvinced that a ship of that size could have traveled that whole distance that it apparently did without a crew. James Winchester, the man who had owned a share of the Mary Celeste, came to Gibraltar to inquire about when the ship would be released to see if they could still deliver its cargo, because they still had cargo on there.
Right.
During a back and forth with Flood, Winchester started to believe that Flood thought that he had deliberately hired a crew who would kill Briggs and his officers as part of some conspiracy. On January 29th, Winchester testified on behalf of Briggs and his high character, saying that Briggs would not abandon his ship unless absolutely necessary. Flood's theories that there had been mutiny and murder were not well received, especially after the stains found, the ones that they thought were blood, were analyzed and were revealed to, in fact, not be blood. Though the blows on the bow were not man-made, but had occurred due to natural actions of the sea on the ship's timbers. So
everything was...
Yeah. Natural. Having nothing concrete to stand on, the Mary Celeste was released from the court's jurisdiction on February 25th. The Mary Celeste left Gibraltar 2 weeks later with a crew headed by Captain George Blatchford, a man from Massachusetts. Payment for the salvage was awarded on April 8th to be £1,700, or about $1,919, or about 1/5 of the total value of the ship and the cargo, which was incredibly much lower than what many people expected the crew to receive for such a dangerous salvage. The man named Cochrane, who was the one who announced the amount the crew would be getting, but he made it clear that he was very skeptical of the men of the De Gratia and what had occurred to the crew of the Mary Celeste. He said that Morehouse and his crew, quote, would be under suspicion in the court of public opinion forever. So he's just not convinced they had nothing to do with it. So what happened? We have many proposed explanations.
Of course we do.
So there are quite a few theories surrounding the whole mystery and what happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste. So the main theory we have to look at and suspect is foul play. So we have Flood and his theory of murder and conspiracy, but those weren't supported due to lack of evidence showing that nothing like that even happened. The first big theory dealing with foul play is mutiny. So this theory believes that the crew got drunk on the alcohol they were transporting, and in a drunken haze, they all killed each other. Those who survived had sailed away on the ship's lifeboat. But that's not
Was
quite...
the lifeboat missing?
Yes. Yes. So this isn't quite possible, though, at least in this sense. So there were no bloodstains on the boat, no bodies were found, and the alcohol wasn't actually alcohol you could drink. It was denatured alcohol, so drinking it would be fatal. So there's no way that a drunken haze could be responsible.
Right.
And it's like, you can buy denatured alcohol from, like, Home Depot.
Yeah.
So it's not...
Like cleaning alcohol.
Yes, yeah. So it's not just drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
There was also the belief that Winchester was engaging in insurance fraud. It said that he had overinsured his boat and the cargo and had planned for the ship to get destroyed somehow, and that way he would cash out on the insurance. While that claim was looked into, his ship and cargo were not overinsured. These allegations were refuted, and no further inquiries were looked into for this claim. Another branch of this theory claims that Winchester had assembled a crew for the specific task of murder, another way to get the insurance money, I guess, but also that clearly wasn't true.
Right.
And that sort of goes into the next theory, that Briggs and Morehouse were conspiring together and had formulated this whole plan so the two could just share the salvage proceedings / insurance money. This one is heavily critiqued, as it wouldn't make sense why the two of them would plan something that would become such a huge mystery outside of that plan. Like,
Right.
Why would you do something that would obviously be looked into?
Right.
So it was also questioned why Briggs would leave his son Arthur behind if he did plan to permanently disappear with the rest of his family.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't he just have brought Arthur with him if he
Yep.
wanted to make his family disappear and live somewhere else?
Yeah.
Another theory of foul play is that Morehouse, the captain of the De Gratia, wanted the Mary Celeste for himself, so he and his ship laid in wait for her. They then lured Briggs and his crew onto a ship, killing the entire crew of the Mary Celeste there. That way, the maritime law would take effect, and voila, they would now have money. But this one also doesn't make sense. The Mary Celeste left New York 8 days before the De Gratia, and the De Gratia was already a slower ship to start off with, so there's no way they could have caught up to the Mary Celeste and pulled off this whole plan.
Yeah.
Another theory is that the Mary Celeste fell victim to an attack by Riffian pirates who were active on the coast of Morocco in the 1870s. But this also doesn't make sense, because if pirates had taken over the ship, they would have looted it. Yet all of the captain's and crewmates' possessions, some being quite valuable, were left undisturbed, as well as the 1,701 barrels of alcohol in the cargo hold area.
Yeah.
Then one final theory in the whole foul play arena is from 1925 by a historian named John Gilbert Lockhart. Lockhart had written a book where he theorized that Briggs had suffered a fit of religious mania, as Briggs was known to be a devout Christian, and during that fight he slaughtered all of the crew members, his family, and then himself. But Lockhart eventually spoke to descendants of Briggs. He later apologized for that statement he made and withdrew his theory in a later edition of his book.
And also, there would be bodies on board.
Right. Or there would be some, showing that it happened. Even if you threw the bodies overboard, there'd be some evidence on board.
Why would the lifeboat still be gone? Right.
So it's all stupid. So if not foul play, we have another theory known as the Lifeboat Theory. So like I mentioned, the yawl or lifeboat was missing on the Mary Celeste. In this one, it is believed that there was some danger that those on board were aware of, maybe a fire, explosion, or something. They would have gotten onto the lifeboat, also known as the yawl, and used a tow line to remain attached to the main ship while being able to get far away from the ship. So they got onto the lifeboat, there's a string pretty much attaching them to the main boat, so whatever can go on there, they can get back. So they would stay on the lifeboat until the danger passed, then use the rope to get back to the Mary Celeste. But if the tow line holding the yawl and the Mary Celeste together had separated, the ship would have sailed off unmanned, leaving the crew on the yawl. Paul Begg, not sure who this guy is, but he's part of the debunking and thoughts on different theories, said that it would have been illogical to attach a yawl to a boat that the crew thought would explode or sink, because obviously, then you're attached to this boat. MacDonald Hastings, another one of these guys, pointed out that Briggs was an experienced captain and wouldn't have let a panicked abandonment take place. Another lifeboat theory came from Arthur N. Putman, an insurance appraiser from New York who was a leading investigator in sea mysteries in the early 20th century. Some people have very specific jobs.
Yeah, right?
He stressed that only one lifeboat was missing from the ship. Yes. He also noticed that the rope holding the boat had been cut rather than being untied, which he went on to say that if the Mary Celeste had been abandoned, it would have been done quickly, where cutting would have been much quicker than untying. He also mentioned that the captain's log aboard the Mary Celeste mentioned the sound of ominous rumbling and small explosions coming from the hold. But petroleum, which the crew was transporting, naturally gives off explosive gas, so these sounds are a pretty common thing apparently. So Putman theorized that one day there had been a more intense explosion in the hold, so a sailor went down to check on it. He may have lit a cigar or a light of some sort, which set off the fumes, causing an explosion violent enough to blow off.
I thought that they didn't find any, some fire, whatever.
Well, so this explosion could have been violent enough to blow the top covering off the hatch, which had actually been found in an unusual position. They believe this frightened the captain, so in his panic, he, his family, and the crew all piled into one lifeboat, cut the rope, and set off to sea, abandoning the vessel in the process. So with your thing, I didn't write this down, but I read it. So recently, or sometime in the past couple years, they tried to see if you could have an explosion with petroleum and see what would happen. So it is possible that it causes a fire, but not one that gives off soot. So it causes this explosion, but there's not going to be any burn marks left. There's not going to be any soot left. So it's not going to look like a fire had happened.
Okay.
So that's another thing they could think of. So out of the two lifeboat theories, I think I would believe the second one a bit more. But it just seems ill-prepared in my opinion. So I'm sure Briggs was aware of petroleum and the noises it can make. He's an experienced dude. I doubt he would just hop into a lifeboat without a solid plan for his crew and family about where to go once they were in the lifeboat.
Right.
Then we have natural phenomena or just other unexplained situations. Many commenters are in agreement that something had to happen, something alarming and extraordinary, which caused the entire crew to abandon their ship, especially with the fact that Briggs had stated that he would not leave the ship unless there was a severe threat to his life present. Because, again, he's a very experienced sailor. He's not just going to abandon the ship.
Especially if his family's on there, too.
Exactly.
He's going to take extra precautions.
Exactly. So DeVoe from the De Gratia proposed a theory centered around the sounding rod he found on the deck when he boarded the Mary Celeste the first time.
What's the sounding rod again?
That's the one that alerts the ship and the crew if, it's starting to rapidly take on water, if the boat is. So he believed that this was a false sounding, that there had been some sort of malfunction of the pipes or pumps or some other mishap that led Briggs to the false assumption that the ship was taking on a lot of water very rapidly. This could have been due to a severe water spout. So a water spout is a, quote, intense columnar? An intense columnar.
Like, swallowed half of that word.
It's column with AR at the end. So an intense columnar vortex, usually appearing as a funnel-shaped cloud that occurs over a body of water. Most waterspouts do not suck up water. They are small and weak rotating columns of air over water. So really, they look like tornadoes in the water. They can pose threats to watercraft, aircraft, and people. So this waterspout could explain the amount of water in the ship and the ragged state of her sails and rigging. Quote, the low barometric pressure generated by the spout could have driven water from the bilges up into the pump, leading the crew to assume that the ship had taken on more water than she had and was in danger of sinking. So fearing the ship was sinking, Briggs and the crew hopped into a lifeboat and sailed away.
I feel like they still couldn't sail away fast enough to not see it sink.
I don't know.
Like, you would see it sink.
Yeah.
And then you would see it not sink.
Unless they've rowed really fast away. I don't know. There was also the fear of an iceberg.
Ah, those pesky icebergs.
But this wasn't very possible. They just don't think this is a very probable thing.
I mean, it happened to the Titanic, so.
It did, but the Titanic was in colder water. And also,
fair.
other ships would have seen this iceberg and reported, oh, there was an iceberg.
When I tell you the panic I had on the first cruise I ever went on, that we would go run into an iceberg.
Because didn't you go somewhere cold?
Nope.
Oh.
We went to the Caribbean.
Ah, yes. That dang Caribbean iceberg.
We did go to Canada, Nova Scotia,
Yeah.
actually. So I was a little bit more concerned there, but it was August, so I figured,
All of them are melted.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all
Okay.
melting anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They also believe there could have been a sudden submarine earthquake. So this could have caused turbulence on the surface, damaging parts of the Mary Celeste's cargo, releasing noxious fumes from the alcohol being transported. Briggs must have feared an explosion, so he ordered everyone off the boat, sort of like the theory I talked about earlier. But instead of just trying to get far away from the boat altogether, they instead failed to secure a tow line from the yawl to the boat, and a sudden breeze could have blown the yawl away, where those aboard succumbed to the elements. Another one is running aground while becalmed. Becalmed means pretty much just losing wind.
Mm-hmm.
So one theory that Begg put forward is that the Mary Celeste had drifted towards the Dalabarat Reef off Santa Maria Island, where she was becalmed. So she is just sailing along, and then the wind just stops. Captain Briggs may have feared that the ship would run aground, so he launched the yawl in hopes of reaching land, so his boat. But the wind could have returned and blew the Mary Celeste away. The wind could also have caused some more waves, swamping and sinking the yawl. But this theory was debunked because if the ship had been becalmed, the sails would have been set in a certain way to catch any wind possible, but instead, upon finding the ship, the sails had been found furled, meaning that they weren't set in a way to catch wind, so this theory kind of just doesn't hold weight. Or maybe the Mary Celeste just got lost. So like I mentioned, the ship had been refitted before it became the Mary Celeste. On one of their previous voyages, the ship had carried coal. So it is believed that the coal and the dust of all of that coal and just kind of all the stuff going on had clogged a pump, which led to it being dismantled. So now only one pump is working as opposed to two. Briggs would have no way of knowing how much water was in the cargo area, and he wouldn't have been able to check with all the cargo being in the way of seeing the ground. He would have checked his chronometer, which was damaged, and with that, Briggs thought that they were 120 miles west of where they actually were. So according to his inaccurate calculations, he believed he would be seeing land 3 days earlier than he actually would. So if he actually believed he was sinking due to the bad weather, the pumps being broken, and the incorrect chronometer, he may have ordered his crew to abandon the ship in hopes of reaching land, which again he thought was much closer than it actually was. So they got in the life raft and didn't make it to land, which was much further away than anticipated, and just kind of... And then you have the other theories. So the men were eaten by sharks, they were attacked or picked off by one of the giant squids. So this is a common belief of many sailors. It's known that there have been times when giant squids have mistaken ships for whales and sometimes have attacked them. Some sailors describe cases where, quote, giant squids with their tentacles that have plate-sized suction cups on them have swept a crew member or even a couple of crew members from the deck of the ship. So giant squids can actually get up to be 43 feet, 13.1 meters long, and weigh up to 600 pounds. So with that theory, they literally believe that it's like a kraken. It just comes up and grabs all these people off the ship. Or they could have been subjected to a mystical experience, so one connected to the Great Pyramid of Giza or the Lost Empire of Atlantis. They may have experienced the Bermuda Triangle, though they were in the wrong part of the Atlantic for that to happen.
Are they on the other side?
They're in the Atlantic,
Right,
which
but-
is where the Bermuda Triangle is. But yeah, they're not near the Bermuda Triangle. Maybe they hit a time warp or an alternate dimension. Or the most common theory, they were abducted by aliens.
Ah, yes, alien theory. I have one of those.
Of course, what is that?
I don't know.
Sounds like a leaf blower or a vacuum. Well, hopefully you can't hear it. So, in her memory, the Mary Celeste went on a few more voyages after it was fixed up, but met its ultimate demise when it was intentionally wrecked by a captain looking to cash out on the insurance money. So that dude had overinsured everything and tried to wreck it so he could get the money. It did not work. At Spencer's Island, Mary Celeste and her lost crew have a monument commemorating them. Postage stamps have been issued twice in Gibraltar and twice in the Maldives to commemorate the ship and her crew. Though the Mary Celeste is literally no more, sailors have reported seeing her still sailing on the Atlantic. So what do you think happened to the Mary Celeste and her 10 crew members? The world may never know. What do you think happened?
Logically, probably one of the ideas of them having to abandon the ship for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then succumbing to elements, especially if they were farther off the coast than they anticipated.
I think that one does make a lot of sense. Like, his calculations were wrong, something happened, they're further away than they thought they would be.
A more fun theory? Aliens.
Aliens. Aliens is always the best theory.
Yeah.
All right, Mackenzie, what are you talking about?
Well, keeping with the theme of water, I am going to shed some light on the disappearances of 3 lighthouse keepers.
You should have seen Mackenzie's face when she said light. I knew something was coming.
So, I love lighthouses, and my dream is to live in a lighthouse with my 8 fluffy dogs
Mm-hmm.
and never speak to a human again.
Except me. For this
Right.
podcast. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Except you for this podcast. These men, I'm sure, would have wanted to see people again, but they did not get the chance to.
Oh.
So, here's some background. The Flannan
Flannan. I think I like that one the most, no matter what's right.
So, the Flannan Isles are a rocky set of islands off the coast of Scotland. These isles have a long history of strange happenings and urban legends. Before the lighthouse was built, shepherds would bring their sheep to these isles to graze on the grass. It was said that the sheep who ate this grass would bear twins or be cured of any illness they had.
Oh, wow.
However, the shepherds feared that a ghost haunted the island and never stayed the night. In 1985, David Allen Stevenson designed the lighthouse for the Northern Lighthouse Board. Construction began on the island's largest island, Eilean Mor, and was completed by 1899. The island also consisted of some small huts and a church which now stand as ruins. There was a rotation system where the men would work 6 weeks on and 2 weeks off.
Would you like that schedule?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could live with it.
Yeah, I think I could too. 2 weeks off would be really nice.
Yeah. So their schedules were staggered so that 3 men were always working the lighthouse. The lighthouse was kept by James Ducat, who was the principal keeper, William Ross, who was first assistant, Thomas Marshall, second assistant, and Donald MacArthur, who was occasional keeper. In mid-December 1900, James Ducat, principal keeper, and Thomas Marshall, second assistant, and Donald MacArthur, occasional keeper, who was doing duty for William Ross, the first assistant, who was on sick leave.
Okay.
Mr. Ducat was 43 at the time and had a wife with 4 children at home. Mr. Ducat has over 20 years of lighthouse keeping experience. Mr. Marshall was also married with 2 children and in his 40s, and the youngest was Mr. MacArthur, who was 28 at the time when he disappeared. Although I'm not sure if I don't know if he was married.
Okay.
On December 15th, a ship passing by the lighthouse noted that they had not seen any light being emitted from the house. All the reports I have found have varying stories of what comes next. Some say that the ship notified the NLB, which is the Northern Lighthouse Board, and then sent people to investigate. Others say that the NLB couldn't go to the island because of a bad storm. However, the NLB themselves have said that they were not made aware of the lack of light until the routine maintenance ship Hesperus went to... I didn't finish that sentence. Yeah. However, the NLB themselves have said that they were not made aware of the lack of light until the routine maintenance ship, the Hesperus, went for routine maintenance.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to go with, is theirs. So when the Hesperus arrived at the island, they too were not met with any light from the lighthouse. They blew their horns, sent up flares, but no response. They sent James Moore, who was to be the relief for one of the men, to investigate. When Moore arrived at the east landing of the island, nothing seemed to be out of place. When he got to the lighthouse, the front gate, the entryway door, and the front door were all closed. However, the kitchen door was open. When Moore entered the kitchen, he could tell the fire had not been lit for several days, and he went to all the men's rooms and noted that they looked as if the men had gotten out of bed, performed their duties like they do every day.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing looked out of place. They even inspected the light, and it seemed to be in working order, ready to be lit by its keepers. The captain of the Hesperus sent a telegram to the NLB on their discovery, saying, quote, "On our arrival there this afternoon, no sign of light was to be seen on the island. Fired a rocket, but as no response was made, managed to land Moore, who went up to the station and found no keepers there. The clocks were stopped, and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane or something like that." Robert Muirhead, I'm going to go with that, Muirhead. Okay. I'm not really sure if that's how you say it, but that's what I'm going to go with.
Sounds good.
Went to investigate the disappearances on December 29th. Muirhead conducted a thorough investigation of the entire island. He also concluded that the light was in perfect working order. The last entry in the log was made on December 13th. However, notes on a chalkboard indicated that all expected duties had been performed that day, meaning all the work was done. And the last entry was about cleaning pots and pans.
So like your typical stuff.
Meaning that the assigned cook had done his duties as well, making it the evening of the 15th, the night the men disappeared. This would match what the captain of the Arctur saw that night, or lack of what he saw, meaning like that's why you didn't see the light when he passed by.
Mm-hmm.
Upon further investigation, all the equipment on the east landing was in working order. Nothing appeared out of place or broken. There was a large crane on the west landing of the island. It and all its parts were intact. However, Muirhead noted that, quote, "the iron railings round the crane platform and from the terminus of the tramway to the concrete steps up from the west landing were displaced and twisted. A large block of stone weighing upwards of 20 CWT, which means head weight, and that's about 100 pounds in the U.S., so 20 of those."
Oh, okay.
Big ass rock.
Yeah.
Had been dislodged from its position higher up and carried down to and left on the concrete path leading from the terminus of the tramway to the top of the steps. A life buoy fastened to the railings along this path to be used in case of an emergency had disappeared, and I thought at first that it was been removed on purpose for being used. Examining the ropes by which it was fastened, I found that they had not been touched. So it was just gone.
And who is this talking?
This is the investigator guy.
Oh, okay.
And as pieces of canvas was adhering to the ropes, it was evident that the force of the sea pouring through the railings had, even at its great height of 110 feet above sea level, torn the life buoy off the ropes. So, wave jumped 110 feet, got the buoy.
That's terrifying.
Might not be possible.
Well, a wave that big, I think that's possible.
Maybe.
I feel like in some places where the sea is very scary.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like really high up.
Yeah.
Like it would have to be, like it'd be one thing if it like it probably could splash. But
Yeah.
a wave high enough that meaning that the force of it coming down.
Oh, yeah. So it would have to be even higher than that because it would have to be so strong. Oof. Oof.
Yeah.
I don't even like thinking about that.
Yeah, I have nightmares about those kinds of things.
Did I tell you about the pictures that I saw? I can take this out, but it's just a cool story. So Mr. Ballin, he did a video, and it was like 3 scary pictures taken before death or something. And so there was this one couple. They wanted to spend their Christmas like by themselves. They didn't have any kids. They're like, we're going to go to Thailand because they love Thailand. So they're at their resort, and Christmas morning they were like, oh, we're just going to go down to the water and just spend our whole day like down in the water. So they go out at like 9 a.m. and they see all these people down on the beach taking pictures. And they're like, what's going on? So they're looking, and it's super low tide, like really like exponentially lower tide than it should be. And everyone's like taking pictures thinking this is the coolest thing. Well, when water ascends really quickly, it's because a tsunami's coming.
Right.
And so they're out there looking at like, oh my God, what is going on? Well, no one's like thinking that it's a tsunami. So tsunami comes, wipes everyone out. They find her camera like 4 months later, and they're looking through the pictures. The last 5 pictures on her camera are of the wave coming.
Oh my God.
Isn't that terrifying?
That is terrifying.
So it's in the distance, and you just see it getting bigger and bigger, and then the last picture on her camera is it crashing right before them. Oh, I know. It's such a creepy video.
I mean, I guess unless there was a tsunami.
It was a tsunami.
No. I mean, like,
Oh, you mean here? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. But
I don't know if
just
those
big
happens in
waves
Scotland.
and big water. I don't know. So scary.
Very scary. Moorhead also noticed that Ducat's and Marshall's seaboats and oilskins were missing. Moore assured him that that would only be the case if the men were going down to the landings. However, there was a pair of clothing left behind, so Moorhead concluded that Ducat and Marshall went to secure the equipment, and MacArthur, rushing out into the bad weather to help, left his clothes behind. Moorhead's conclusion of the disappearance is as follows, quote, I am of the opinion that the most likely explanation of the disappearance of the men is that they had all gone down on the afternoon of Saturday, 15th December, so annoying how that's how the dates, to the proximity of the West Landing to secure the box with the mooring ropes, etc., and that an unexpectedly large roller had come up on the island and a large body of water going up higher than where they were and coming down upon them had swept them away with resistless force.
So they're still thinking again, like a really big wave.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
A few things I would like to note from other sources. I know that these quotes are directly from the investigator, but this disappearance was also talked about BuzzFeed Unsolved.
Yes, we love BuzzFeed Unsolved.
Yes, and they stated that it was Moore and his men who discovered that the West Landing was damaged, and that they also found all the same things as the investigator, but they claimed that this damage was already noted in the log.
Mm.
So the damage that they saw wouldn't have been a part of...
Whatever happened to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something else that they noted, and for those who are also skeptical of a 110-foot wave, historian Mike Dash found a wreck from a lighthouse keeper in the 1950s that water had splashed as high as 300 feet on the island.
Whoa.
So this would mean that it would reach the top of the lighthouse.
I don't
get
like
wet.
that.
Yeah. This lighthouse keeper even tried to get a photo of these massive waves and was nearly washed away himself.
Ew.
It was also discovered that the lighthouse may have had some issues prior to the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
The lighthouse is too far from anywhere to be able to get help by telegram. And so there was a gamesman by the name of Roderick Mackenzie. Yes, spelled correctly, even with a capital K, which would make sense because my name is Scottish like royalty.
Oh.
My dad, when he went to Scotland, brought me back like a beer mug that had
Oh.
my name on it
That's cool.
with like a crest.
That's cool.
Not Scottish, just my name.
Just your name.
Just my name.
Oh.
We're
okay.
Irish. We're Irish. It was his job to keep watch of the lighthouse from his place ashore. And so there were signals that he would look for that if there were any issues, like they had these ball thingies that apparently when they did something with them, that meant there was a problem.
Okay.
So if there was an issue, he would then report it to the NLB.
Okay.
When questioned, Mackenzie reported that from December 7th to the 26th, he could not physically see the lighthouse. He claimed that he could see the light via telescope on the 12th,
Mm-hmm.
but not again until Moore had lit it with his arrival on the island on the 26th.
Okay.
Mackenzie was not a lighthouse keeper, so he did not really think anything was a problem. It said that a light being out for 2 weeks on a lighthouse was normal.
That seems dangerous.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that should be normal.
No. Some reports said Mackenzie claimed it wasn't completely unusual to not be able to see the light. However, he admitted to becoming concerned when he hadn't seen it for 2 weeks. Still didn't report it, though.
Sir.
Like, the only reason why this is reported was because they went to the island for maintenance.
Yeah.
And
We're like, oh, there's no light.
right, exactly. Like, even the ship that got no light, they had reported it to, like, the port,
Mm-hmm.
but it never got
To where it needed to go.
to, yeah, exactly. So, some theories. While the explanation makes total sense and seems 100% the likely cause, the masses were not satisfied with this conclusion and came up with their own ideas.
Of course, as they do.
So going back to the last log made on December 13th, nothing was noted to be out of the ordinary. The only thing the men noted was the morale was low,
Oh, well, I mean, I would think so.
and there had been strong winds and storms.
Okay.
However, there are no records showing that there had been any such storms during that time.
See, this is the part of the case I remember.
Well, shush.
No, I'm not going to say anything.
Better
That's
not.
the only part I remember is what I'm saying,
Give me
Mackenzie.
another story. So, was there a storm that was only over these small islands? Were the men losing their mind? One theory suggests that there was more that was written by Donald MacArthur about the nights prior to the disappearances. MacArthur stated that the storms were so bad that the men began to pray. Some found this to be odd because the men were in a lighthouse that was 150 feet above sea level and only a year old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have been fine.
Yeah.
MacArthur also indicated that Thomas Marshall, who was known as being Mr. Tough Guy, was crying over the severity of the storms.
Oh, wow.
which also didn't make sense because Marshall and Ducat had like 20 years experience as a lighthouse keeper.
And I'm sure they would have seen storms in their time.
Right. So the morning of the 15th, MacArthur is quoted as saying, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." Many say that these logs are fiction. Even if they are true, it does not shed much light on how or why they disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the rumor of the logs.
Yes.
So morale was low, rumor of the logs. Some theorize that one of the men had a psychological breakdown, which led to their deaths. And it was rumored...
Like him causing the deaths?
Yeah, because it was rumored that MacArthur has a temper.
Oh.
And he was known for settling arguments with his fists.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Could a scuffle have broken out, which led the men to falling off the cliffs? Or maybe MacArthur was the one who had a psychological breakdown, which would attest to the strangeness of his supposed last logs. Maybe he came to his senses and, realizing what he'd done, jumped from the cliffs himself.
Okay.
But there is no evidence of violence found on the island.
Yeah, and then they would have found, like, the bodies and stuff, right?
Yeah, they never found those either.
Yeah.
Some, of course, believe this was the work of foreign spies capturing the men. Ryan and
Why?
I don't know. The same reason why they thought it was like a sea serpent.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Ryan and Shane from BuzzFeed Unsolved think that it could have also been abducted by aliens.
Yes. Always the easy go-to theory.
Well, one of them does.
Ryan does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure which one it was, but one of them
Shane
does.
is the very skeptical one who doesn't believe anything, and then Ryan is the, like, thinks there's ghosts everywhere. And
he was coming up with some great puns. That's where I got my light pun from.
Oh. His fans, his last name's Bagara or whatever, and his fans call themselves the Boogaras.
Oh,
yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I saw a tweet from, I guess, Shane, and he was like, you know, the last like place we went to, like I know I'm normally a skeptic. That's what I've built my whole brand on, but there's just some things that really just blow your mind. And he had like posted like a picture that I guess someone had sent him, and he's like, I did all these like technical things and analyzed it, and this is what I saw. And then the last picture is, I don't know, one of the bad guys that's famous. Like,
What?
I don't know which movie he's from.
Oh, okay.
But he's one of those men.
Okay.
And it's like him, it's a picture of him, and I can't remember where he's standing, but it's basically like, you really think that he's changed his mind. And then the last picture is like, gotcha. It's very funny.
Yes, I really do like him.
One of them says that it's aliens, saying that the rails and ropes were knocked off by something that wasn't man and 110 feet in the air.
Okay.
And since there was also no scuffle, the men were drawn to the light from the aliens. They went to check it out and got abducted.
I mean, very plausible.
Many believe the work of a sea monster or known sprites in the area could be at fault.
Of course.
So in Scotland, there are known water sprites called the Blue Men of Minch, also known as storm kelpies.
Oh,
And that's a cute name.
that is cute.
They're not nice, though.
No.
Of the Outer Hebrides, which is where the islands are located. These sprites are strong and have green hair. They supposedly live in caves and like to sink ships to drown sailors.
Oh, that's not nice.
This sprite's funny. So the legend says that if these men did encounter these sprites, then they would only be able to survive if they had the last word in a rhyming duel.
Oh.
So like the original rap battle.
Oh, that's fun.
Right? They tried to do one on the show, and
Oh my god, of course they
Shane
did.
failed miserably. Like nothing he said rhymed.
I'm just going to have to watch this episode
Oh,
just
it was
because.
very funny. It was great. Another local legend claims that when Moore got to the island, there were 3 black birds, and they were seated at the top of the lighthouse, and those birds flew away upon Moore's arrival. Some say that those birds were the 3 men who had not respected the powers of the island.
Oh.
One theory that Shane and Ryan also had was that they were like lovers, like the
men?
3 men became
Okay.
like lovers, and either there was like a lovers quarrel.
Quarrel.
Yeah. Okay. Or they were like, oh no, like the 3 of us are happy. Like let's go off and be happy together.
Oh, like let's run away together.
Yeah.
Oh.
So who knows? Because their bodies were never found.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are many ideas as to what happened to these men, both logical and mystical. The lighthouse was run by people until 1971 when it became automatic. The lighthouse keepers who worked there during those 70 years claimed they could hear someone whispering the names of the lost men
Ew.
into the wind.
Oh no.
So that is the story of the missing lighthouse keepers of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse.
Wow. What do you think happened?
I think what the guy reported
Mm-hmm.
would make sense.
With the waves.
Yeah. And especially if you think about like how long it took them to get out there. If they fell on the 15th and no one went there until the 26th, which is almost 10 days later, they might not find bodies.
So, yeah, I don't think a wave could reach that high. I looked up biggest reported waves. And the official largest open water wave ever recorded measured to 62 feet.
Yeah. So that's kind of why it's like, I could see them falling for some reason. Like maybe there was
a cliff.
Yeah, like maybe there was a bad storm and it made the cliff like wet and they were like knocked off, and like the wind could have been strong enough to maybe knock the buoy off and things like that, because they said it wasn't like taken off by a man.
Yeah, wind could have done it.
And then if they are not out there until 10 days later, but I don't know how good weather reporting was in 1900.
Yeah.
But supposedly there was no reports of any bad storms.
See, that's the one that I think is the coolest. Like, that's the part of it that I remember the most, is the whole, like, that there was a storm, and they reported, like, it was this awful storm, and then they, like, looked back at the weather meteorological things, and there was never a storm.
Yeah. So, then that leads me to, okay, maybe they did lose it.
Maybe.
And we're going a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But one of the things that people kept commenting on was that most of these men had years of experience. So it's not like getting cabin fever would be a thing.
Right. It's not something you would think
or 2 weeks off.
And it's something that they've done a lot. So it's like they've had experience and know kind of,
Exactly.
what it feels like.
And then even with the sprites, I'm like, okay, but they're not on a ship.
What, are sprites only on ships?
Well, it's like the idea being that they sink ships to get sailors.
Oh.
And so if...
Maybe it's just like proximity, like, oh, you're near the water.
Yeah. Now, granted, remember what I said is that before this lighthouse was built, people were very sketched out by this island. And shepherds wouldn't stay with... sheep loved it. Great for them. Everybody else, not so much. So I kind of like the idea of the last one where this lighthouse was built on this island and the island was pissed about it. Maybe the men did something shady.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe they weren't very good people. I couldn't find much on the men themselves. And
the island was just like,
because they didn't find any bodies. Like, I feel like
that is the weird part. And then if they didn't find any bodies, they also didn't find any evidence that anything happened.
Right, because this thing isn't so far away from shore that you can't see it, because that's what the Mackenzie's guy's job is.
Yeah.
So I feel like it would have washed ashore somewhere. Or something.
I don't know.
I
love these kind of mysteries and disappearances. It's just so fun.
It just seems like they really did just poof.
Yeah.
Gone.
Aliens.
Aliens. That's it.
Only explanation.
That's what it is.
Well,
if you have your ideas,
let us know.
Let us know what you think.
This
on
is
all our
one.
socials.
What are our socials, Kenzie?
On Twitter, it's at A Scary State Pod. And Facebook and Instagram, it's at A Scary State Podcast. And then our website is one that I can never get right, so I'm going to let Lauren do it.
www.ascarystatepodcast.squarespace.com. And send us emails at ascarystatepodcast@gmail.com.
If you got some scary stuff happening in your life, let us know.
Or if you've had anything creepy happen to you while you've been on a boat or water.
Oh, yeah.
Or a lighthouse.
If you've been to the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh, yeah.
Share that story.
When Joe and I were supposed to go on our cruise and then COVID, we were going to Bermuda. And we were going to go through the Bermuda Triangle. And I was actually pretty scared.
Yeah.
But, COVID is great, so that didn't happen.
Maybe that's probably a good thing.
Maybe. But I would have liked to go on a cruise. Even though cruises scare me, but still.
Yeah. It's a little, odd when you're at sea for a couple of days.
Yeah, and all you can see is water.
Yeah. That's a little kind of...
I can see that.
Yeah.
And then, have you seen those videos, too, where it's, people on, fishing boats or crabbing boats or whatever are in the middle of the ocean? There's just these huge waves.
Yeah, but with where you go,
oh, yeah, you're not
going to... The ship is so big.
It's just so
wild. So high up.
Yeah.
That yeah. There was one time we went on one, and we were at one of the stops, and I could see dark clouds rolling in.
Oh, nope.
And I still had a very strong fear of thunderstorms at the time.
As you still do, yeah.
No. I'm just getting nervous.
Okay.
Okay, but this, I was panicking because it's one thing when it's a bad thunderstorm and I'm a little nervous, but if I have to be outside,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm petrified and on a fucking boat.
Yeah.
Like,
in the middle of the
I was
ocean.
Like a sobbing, like losing my shit that we were going to die.
Did you hear like the thunderstorm?
I don't remember. I just remember.
Oh, because that would be really interesting.
It was so long ago.
Yeah.
I think it was the summer before high school. I
Oh.
started high school.
Oh my God. So yeah, over 10 years ago. Way over 10 years ago.
You know, we've almost been out of college for 10 years.
Ew.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
sorry.
I don't like that at all. Well, thank you for listening.
You're still listening at this point.
As we reminisce. Yeah. So stay scary.
Stay safe.